So start off. Does anybody have a pecuniary interest that they need to declare? Seeing none, move on. Previous minutes from the March meeting. Has anybody got any errors, oversights, extensions that they wish to raise?
Nope.
Nope. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Kathy? And
second.
I'll second.
oh, Wayne. Okay, Wayne, second. Thank you. So moving on. Business from previous minutes. Report card update.
Okay, I can fill you in on that. Casey, do we need to all vote on the minutes, or is that okay?
Yes, actually, if we could just all in favor, then that would
Okay,
be
all
great.
in.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Yes.
Yep, I'm in favor.
Okay, so the report card update is that I apologize. I didn't get the numbers yet from the police to update the final statistics. So I have it here in my calendar. I'm going to do it this week and then send you out what I have well before the meeting so you can have a look at it and to make sure we aren't missing anything. And then I would imagine then it can go on to the person to design it from there. So that's the update.
Oh, Lee, maybe you could, if you're outside, maybe you could mute.
Sorry about that. Yep.
No worries. Wayfinding update. Tatiana.
Hi, thank you for the chair. So first off, I'm going to apologize. I was planning to screen share a document, but I had to use my cell phone, so I don't have that capability. But as you recall, with respect to the wayfinding, so back in 2018-19, the city of Stratford undertook a comprehensive wayfinding project, and the purpose was to develop a family of signs for the city, considering all modes of transportation. So the plan was adopted by Stratford City Council in 2019, and the next steps of the project were to develop an implementation plan. And as you recall, that plan was put on hold, unfortunately, because of staff turnover and then COVID-19. What I can say is we did install our first round of parking wayfinding signs. So they are in the downtown core. So if you're downtown, you're walking about, I recommend you take a look, see if you can spot them. Always appreciate any thoughts. So with respect to ATAC, so for the 2021 budget, approximately $5,000 was included for TJ Dolan trailhead signage installation and education. And then at that meeting, a request was made for staff to reach out to the Avon Trail organization and get some feedback on trail signs. So staff did meet with them back in October, and we got a bunch of information from them on what it is they would like to see from a trail signage perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to circulate this document that I'm kind of speaking from after the meeting, and then perhaps at the next meeting, we can kind of have a greater discussion on it and get some more feedback. But basically what the organizers would like to see is either blue blazes painted on trees, or they have these little 4x4 signs that can be attached to a post. And it basically denotes the Stratford side trail. So the main Avon trail, they use white blazes and all of the side trails use blue. They've identified 24 locations for the signage or the blazes, whatever we choose. And they've requested an educational blazing sign be posted in the TJ Dolan parking lot. So the purpose of this sign would be to educate new hikers on how they read these blazes and how they venture forth to explore new trails. Then we forwarded you guys the wayfinding strategy, the comprehensive one. So with respect to bike parking, the wayfinding strategy recommends that bicycle directional signage installation needs to ensure that like all links are complete. So the recommendation from the consultants at the time was to install signs as a group and only on facilitated bike routes. So those that are marked routes with regulatory signage and pavement markings in place. So we just have some general information about budget. So the estimated budget included $25,000 approximately for 18 bicycle directional signs to be installed on existing hydro poles based on existing bike lanes in 2017 to 18. And as you are, I'm sure you're aware, the bike and pedestrian master plan is being updated. So again, with any new amendments, we're going to have to kind of relook at the routes and see if any changes need to be made. So we have some pictures of the recommended bicycle signs. It also includes, it's $57,000 for 15 multi-use directional signage to be installed around the Avon River. So that kind of points you to like bus stops or washrooms or trails or other little amenities or facilities that we would want to guide people. So it's quite expensive. What we've sort of been doing is taking the plan, taking a look at the downtown, seeing how much budget we have, and then making plans accordingly. So the next steps are we would like to receive some feedback from this group on your priorities for signage. So we have some following questions that we're going to pose to you. So is the committee's priority for signage bike routes, trail signs, or both? We want to kind of get some feedback on what are the key locations for sign installations and key routes. Based on the Wayfinding Strategy report, like what would you like to see as a final design for this type of signage? What information is most important to you? What do you envision for the design of the trailhead sign at TJ Dolan? And then what is the preferred wording for the trailhead sign at TJ Dolan? So what we've sort of thought it might be beneficial to develop a subcommittee to be formed that can really focus on the project and then provide further recommendations to staff. We would appreciate receiving feedback if we could maybe before the next meeting. I believe there's still one in June. My apologies. Do you guys break in the summer? Yes, for 2 months. Okay, so we still have a meeting in June. So perhaps we can relist this at the June meeting. We can have a more fulsome discussion, get some additional feedback, and then that way we as staff can kind of take that back and start working with our contractors and consultants on developing kind of a draft design, because we would like to kind of start at least getting this to the fabricator and hopefully maybe installed in October. So I know we're kind of missing this season, but at least we can put a lot of the work in and basically have it ready for next year. And just a final point, we did reach out to community services staff and they did support painting the blazes on the trees. So that wasn't an issue that they identified. So I know that was a lot of information that I just sort of threw at you. I apologize for not being able to screen share it, but I'm happy to address any questions that you have right now. And then I'll ensure it's circulated after the meeting.
Kathy, do you have a question?
Well, I have a question.
Can I ask Tanya, what I didn't quite catch what you said about blazes on the trees.
So through the chair, we reached out to staff and community services and they were supportive of painting blazes on the trees. They didn't have any concerns with that.
So I had comment, sort of more or question. So would the idea be that because we set aside some money this year and we wanted to focus on the TJ Dolan, that we would maybe work on what that trailhead signage and things like that look like, and then and because there's money around that, and then would it be a good idea to sort of develop what the signage looks like for the routes, but then refer it, because I'm only saying that because Romeo bike lanes will go in this year. The TJ Dolan piece of multi-use trail is going to go in it is going to go in sometime during this year. So it might make sense. You were asking what to do first. It might make sense to do the trails and TJ Dolan trailheads first this year, and then then look at the system that is created later in the year with the additional pieces to try to decide what kind of the urban part of the wayfinding could be, and then refer it to the next year's budget to have money to do that, just because we'll have more continuous linkages by the end of this year. And I don't know if anybody else knows that from an infrastructure point of view, but is that kind of the direction you're looking for in terms of?
So through the chair, yes, exactly. So we have money specifically for the TJ Dolan. So definitely that would be a good place to start. But because this project is so big and it does have quite a financial impact, we really wanted this committee to kind of take a look at it as a whole and just to start thinking about, okay, what are the priorities? Where are the priority routes? If we're gonna start adding in signs, let's get a sign design so that when we do have budget, annual amounts in the budget, then staff can basically just take that information, give it to our contractor, and then arrange for the signs to be fabricated and installed. So again, it's a lot of information, but yes, that was basically the intent.
That's what I was thinking. I just wanted clarification around that.
Could I ask another question to Tanya? painting blazes for the trail in the TJ Dolan on trees is great because there are trees there. But we're, the long term is we're also hoping for the side trail through Stratford to be signed, in which case trees aren't always available. So we would have to come up with some other alternative for the trail, for the side trail, if we end up signing it through Stratford, because it starts in the east end at the Devon playground and goes all the way along the Avon River to the TJ Dolan. So would you suggest, well, I'm just thinking, would it be acceptable to have the blaze system in TJ Dolan, but an alternative small diamond type sign or something that we come up with for the rest of the side trail through the city to the Devon playground? Would that be the sort of the route to go, or what do you think?
So through the chair, absolutely. So we're really looking for feedback from this group on what makes sense. So when you've kind of chosen your priorities and you're looking at, the current infrastructure, as you said, there may be instances where you really need a sign somewhere, but there isn't a post. So then that just means that we need to start budgeting for these extra infrastructure items. But absolutely, we can kind of accommodate any sorts of changes that need to be made. It's just, again, we have to kind of first identify what the priorities are and what the intent is. And then that way staff can take all this information back and say, okay, if this is what we're hoping to see, this is what it's going to be the cost for the total project. Here are some of the additional things we're going to have to factor in. So getting locates, having poles installed and all that. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Jody, question?
Thanks. Yeah, so basically it's, in a way, it's a two-part thing. So we have the TJ Dolan smaller project that ATAC has money for. And so my first question is about that. I was taking a look at some of the documents you sent, and it looks like there is one that's like an informative and interpretive sign that kind of fits in. So I imagine that we would maybe take that design. Could we also fit the information about the blazes on that sign, or would that be do you envision that being a separate sign that has to be created apart from the information that I'm assuming we're going to take information off of the sign itself that's there right now? That might be another thing for us to look at to see what is there. What does it say right now? And are we good with that?
So through the chair, the one thing I have learned through the parking portion of this project is that there are really good templates in the strategy, but yes, absolutely, we definitely have to amend them. And it really depends on what sort of information you want to include. So if the intent is to do one sign with all of this information, then we may look at it and say, okay, $5,000 isn't enough. Maybe what we need to do is see if we can carry those funds over and add some additional ones. But definitely we would be looking for feedback from you, because I think there is an existing sign there. So it's like, do you want to keep it and build upon it? Is it time to replace it in its entirety? So these are sort of the conversations that we need to have now and really get some feedback on, which is why I think a subcommittee would be really helpful to kind of drill all of this down and provide the feedback on, like, again, what the sign needs to say, what components you're looking for, whether you think it's one or two signs. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And did we have a subcommittee? Kathy, did we form one, or am I?
There was a subcommittee for the mapping, but
for
there
the
isn't one for this specific wayfinding project. And I do agree, this committee is too big to try to make sort of recommendations on that.
Right.
But I think it would be interesting for everybody to go have a look at the sign that's there, because the structure might be great, but you just want to replace the faded, piece, and that might be less expensive. We may be able, I don't even know what's on the other side down by the health unit, but that's a great little trailhead with parking. And I don't even know if there's I don't remember if there's anything there, but that
I don't think so. There's no signage there. That would be a good spot to have at least a small entrance sign of some sort.
So it does sort of require a subcommittee to go out and have a look too.
So yeah, I think subcommittee is a good idea. I'm going to switch over to bike routes now, because again, that's kind of a completely different topic. And this is where I'm going to ask Wayne some questions, because Wayne's kind of the cycling expert. He's created routes around Stratford already for the cycling club. And the thing I wanted to ask you, Wayne, you posted something the other day from Holland. It's a node system for wayfinding.
Yes.
Do you see that as something that you could help us to create, or is it too complicated?
No, it's more suitable to use in the countryside rather than in short distances like in the city. So, you know, when we were talking to Zach Gribble about creating a bike route to Millbank, to the G2G, or to St. Mary's, it would be more suitable for those kind of distances rather than short distances, you know, from one street to another in the city. I think within the city, it's probably just needs, you know, a little sign with a bicycle on it and an arrow going one way or the other.
Okay, and would you see if they had different routes? How would you delineate the different routes? Like put a little word at the bottom, or different color, or just
maybe a color with a map somewhere, like you have at TJ Dolan for the walking route, at a map somewhere in the center of the city.
okay, just
I
trying
think,
to get an
I
idea.
think color would be fine rather than, I suppose a name would be okay too, but I think color would be work.
Usually people do a color with a name. So like if you look in Kitchener, they call them something.
I see.
Also like Kitchener or whatever. Like, I'm going to say KW because I can't tell the difference. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but ask me about like Oro Medonte and I can tell you every side road. Sorry, but you know, there's a system where you can call it something, but you can also give it a color, right? And I think that's easier for people, but yeah.
And through the chair, when I send you the document, you'll see so the first kind of proposed sign is, it's a blue sign with white writing. So the top says bike route with a bike. So I think that's meant to be the name of the bike route. And then underneath it, you have specific destinations listed and then how far they are. So you're kind of outside the downtown and that you're trying to drive people in, and you could maybe put to downtown or to the Rotary Complex, and I apologize, I'm not a biker, I'm a walker. So I'm not as great with the bike pass in the city. So I will just put that out there right now, but that's kind of the intent. And then there is a second sign, which is more of the information sign. So they kind of show you like bike path this way or washroom straight ahead, those kind of more informative decorative signs. So there's really a lot to choose from and to drill down on depending on the route and kind of what messaging or what the goals are.
And you're going to send us this information after this meeting so we can read up on it?
So through the chair, yes, I'm going to send you the document that we created. And then if you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Nancy. And then if you have any questions about the wayfinding strategy in its whole, again, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
If Chair, if there's a subcommittee on this task, I'd be happy to help with that.
Okay, are we ready to, would you like to form the subcommittee now? Yeah, any volunteers? We've got Bernard. John?
Sure.
I'll volunteer the cycling part.
Okay, so is that enough, Tatiana? Would that be, or anybody?
Anything more than 3 and you've got too many.
Yeah,
I think 3 is a good start.
So we've got 4 volunteers, so we'll let them sort out amongst themselves.
Okay. So what I will do, sorry, through the chair, I can send an email out to the 3 subcommittee members. I'll try and schedule something in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, if not earlier, and then we'll kind of go from there if that works for everyone's schedule.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
And Titania, would your email out to us make it very clear what is expected of us?
So through the chair, I have literally a next step section in the document. So basically what I just did for a presentation is all included in this document. And then when we set up the subcommittee, we'll kind of have a discussion and frame an agenda for the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. New business. Review of the ATAC member composition in terms of reference. I guess that's Tatiana, you're up again.
Yes, through the chair, thank you. So as you are aware, for the ATAC terms of reference, I'm just pulling them up. For part of the composition, it has 2 representatives from the Energy and Environment Committee. So some of you will know it has been quite a challenge over the last number of years trying to get 1 member, let alone 2. We were successful this year in getting a member, and actually Energy and Environment is going to be amending their terms of reference to make it a requirement that the vice chair will serve as the representative. And that just kind of gives us a little bit more certainty year over year on who that representative is going to be. But what I would like to do, subject to no major concerns from the committee, is actually amend ATAC's terms of reference and reduce the 2 representatives from E&E just down to 1. From a quorum perspective, I don't think it makes any significant issues. In fact, I think it would help you achieve quorum a little bit more. And then again, it would just kind of alleviate the pressure in trying to find that second member, especially since we cannot seem to fill it. But I wanted to pose that to you and just make sure there weren't any significant concerns with reducing that from 2 to 1.
Any comments? Jody?
I know we discussed it at E&E, and that was definitely the consensus, that it would probably be a better idea just to go with 1 instead of 2, just make it easier for them too. It's because a lot of people are busy, so they only volunteer for 1 committee for a reason. So yeah, I think it's a good idea moving forward.
Anyone else? Casey, I presume we need to vote on this.
Yes, if we could pass a motion to amend the terms of reference, that would be great.
Okay, anybody care to
Move it.
Kathy, move it. Second, please. Lee, thank you very much. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Moving on, the Bicycle Friendly Community Award. Who gets to speak on this? Jody.
I think it's me, yeah. So yeah, we won.
Yay.
Yay, we got an honorable mention. So that means we're trying, and then we have lots of room for improvement. So, but it's good. It's nice to be able to have that designation. You know, it is a fairly safe place to bike, but certainly there are lots of room for improvement. And one of the best parts of going through this process is that they gave us some feedback, which is the next item on the agenda. So maybe we can jump right into that. Oh, and thanks to Wayne, by the way, and Kathy. We all went through with Sarah, line by line. We went through this application. It took a couple hours. So yeah, there was a lot of information to put together. So I think it'll be much easier next time when we go for our next level. There'll be some information there already. So,
Jody,
yep.
ask you a quick question.
Sure.
How do we communicate this to the community? You know, when they had Community in Blooms, there was a big sign. Is there something that's appropriate to do?
Yeah, we did have a press release through the city, and it was in the paper. But you're right, like it should probably sit somewhere on our website, maybe, or I don't know. So we were just talking about signage. Maybe we could put it on a sign somewhere. That might be a nice idea. I'm just trying to think of a place where, let's say you're a cycle tourist and you're coming to Stratford, where would you go and see a sign? Yeah. Any ideas? I don't know. Side of City Hall, maybe?
How about in Queen's Park?
Like
A lot of people who come into the city end up parking in Queen's Park to go biking in the city. Just an idea in one of the parking lots.
right. It's a good idea.
Mhm.
I'm gonna write that down.
Wayne?
Yeah. Well, maybe perhaps if we were doing any other signage in that area, we could sort of incorporate it, because we know that standalone signs are quite expensive. I think we just heard that. So yeah, but that's a great idea. Okay, so
Oh, I was going to say it would be interesting if the signs had bicycle friendly community, but then allowed for our tiers. Like if we went for honorable mention and then had a bronze, and like, you know, how schools make it so that it's reusable. We just stick a sticker on as we proceed. That would, you know, to show our progress, I think would be a fun way to do it.
yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is the Share the Road feedback report. So I thought we could do, it was sent out, I think, almost 2 months ago now. But yeah, if we want to just have a look at it, I'm going to go right to page 2, which is telling us what we need to do to get to the next stage, which is bronze. So as they say, there's no single path towards becoming a great community for cyclists, but there's building blocks. So the first one is engineering. And the first thing is to set a target and identify preliminary steps to update the transportation master plan.
That's already been done.
So we can check that off the list.
Yep.
It's being done. And also this committee recommended using a Vision Zero lens for the master plan, and that's been incorporated into the recommendations. So I guess my only question would be, as we go along, and maybe that's a question for Tyler or Taylor, sorry, of when this committee will get a check-in or some spot to have input as it's being developed. I would imagine it would be further along in the process, but that may be a question that we can send to him.
I already talked to him about their timing around. So they're going to redo the transportation master plan and include active transportation in it, and Vision Zero. And whoever the consultant is that does it will have public consultation and stakeholder consultations with it. So it will be included. Difficulty is we have to hire, I think we need to hire one more engineer before we have the capacity. So it's going to be, it's not soon. It'll be later in the year probably before we get to it.
Right. So we'll just, whoever is going to be leading the way on that project, we'll just make sure the invitations go out to this group so that we can give our feedback as well. And, you know, maybe we can formally go through it together and, you know, look for spots for feedback. Wayne, were you going to say something?
Yeah, talking about an engineer, they recommend an engineer with transportation and planning background,
Yes.
which I think would be very helpful.
And
That's
that's
another one of
what
the
we had with Michelle, and that was the idea of what we'd like to replace.
Right,
Michelle came with all those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. Oh, look, there's Taylor. Okay. So scaling up bike parking. And actually they have a link there talking about bike rack for businesses, which might be an interesting project for us to lead on. So right in the report, there's a link and it goes to, is it Sudbury? Yeah, Greater Sudbury area. And it's basically a bike parking program that basically the city organizes a bulk buy for businesses to buy bike parking at a reduced rate. So I don't know if there's any appetite for us to help coordinate something like that, but.
That was in the bike parking plan though.
Was
So,
it? Okay.
Yeah, it's already in the bike parking plan. And I think we had bought extra posted rings so businesses could ask for them. And if they had a spot that fit and met all the criteria, they would be installed. I know that was part of the bike plan, and the community services did. And I don't know if they've launched it or done anything with it, but we already have it in like there was a 10-year bike parking plan.
Maybe we could bring that out and review it at this committee and just see where we're at. do a little update report card kind of thing. Wayne?
Yeah, Ontario by Bike just had a couple of Zoom meetings last week about bicycle-friendly businesses. And I don't know how many businesses joined that meeting, but certainly they would be the ones that would be good to approach for this bike thing, this bike racks.
For sure. So how do we do this? So could we put that into business, like business arising from this discussion, that we next meeting that we pull that plan and have a look at it? Okay. Any other thoughts on bike parking? I guess it would make sense to look at the plan first before we go any further. Okay, integrate cycling and public transportation by equipping transit vehicles with bike racks to facilitate multimodal travel. So this creates more options for residents to use their bikes in combination with transit. So, I wonder, do we talk to Mike Mosley over at Transit and see what his appetite would be for something like that, or how we would go about doing a project like that?
You could just make a recommendation for community or for the transit to look at the feasibility of adding bike racks onto the current bikes or the current buses that they have. And if they're not compatible now, to build it into maybe what they order in the future. I think that that's the best you can do. I think we did ask at one point, and there was a strange that, and they looked at it previously in the buses that they had. If you added the bike racks, they didn't fit in the garage. I kid you not. It was a weird, it was the idea of putting the bike racks on the front, you know. And so, but maybe that's different now with the new buses. Maybe the configuration is different. I don't know. That would be something to just make a recommendation for the public transit to look at it.
Okay, so go ahead, John.
What about flipping the situation, allowing people to bring bikes on the buses? For example, the LRT and KW, the seats go up, and I've seen this in the US on some of the trains. The seats actually go up and there's a bar so you can actually place your bike along the wall, having the seats going up. So I don't know if that flexibility is available on our buses. A lot of our buses ride empty. So rather than putting racks, if we can put the bikes on the bus and the seats going up to accommodate that, that may be a low-cost solution.
That's something we can ask about for sure.
I mean, they may currently allow people to bring their bikes on if it's not crowded. We don't know what the rules are, right? So that would be.
It'd be good to find out.
So what's the process of finding out? We ask, make a recommendation that gets sent over to transit, or how does it work?
Maybe we can just invite Mike to come and talk about that. Like maybe it's as simple as, I know that Mike is very enthusiastic about, that maybe we can invite him to an upcoming meeting to discuss integration. I know they put bike racks at the new bus terminal and things like that, but maybe it's to see if we could list him to come and talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then we can, you know, it'll be quicker. We'll get a real idea of what's possible and what's not.
And what they've already thought about.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, next up was connecting cycling network through a cross-town route and building accompanying infrastructure. Okay, that one's a little more challenging. Cross-town, I'm assuming means like right down the middle. So, I mean, perhaps our little addition with the TJ Dolan Trail might get us a little further, but it's not all cycling. So, yeah, I don't know. Anybody have a recommendation?
This has to be a connected cycling network. I don't think anybody expects a city the age of Stratford to have Unless you have a rail trail that goes through the middle, if you somehow didn't, develop.
It would have to be assigned route though. Is that the idea then?
Yeah, it's a signed route and a safe way to get from one end of the city to the other. So say if you start at one end up at McCarthy, and once Romeo is done, you go through the park system all the way through along TJ Dolan to TJ through the cemetery, out the back of the cemetery to the service road, and that'll take you all the way out to Alone. And all of the vast majority of that is separated or bike lane, like bike infrastructure. So I would say maybe not this year, but probably next year we would check this box off if we're looking for a single cross the city bike network.
Right. So it would be important then to link all the Romeo, like having a bike lane all the way on Romeo to get us across to the park.
Well, I don't know about the full length of.
Well, not the full, right?
Like you need to get to Delamere. You basically need to get to Delamere. Yeah.
Wayne, you had a comment?
Wouldn't it be more like we've talked about before, getting like spokes in a wheel, getting safe routes from the outskirts into the city center from various parts of the city?
Yeah. And one of it is sort of like now you have Mornington, so then you would have Romeo to the park system. So that we have then John Street, like we have some of those. The difficulty we're going to go back to that southeast corner is the challenge. A lot of the others exist and aren't too bad. That southeast corner is still a challenge, I think. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about it later, but when we went to the accessibility committee, they were talking about Lorne going around that side, multi-use trail, and also Duro. So those would be really important linkages, I think. Okay, so next we have focus on all ages and abilities type facilities, including on-road separated bike facilities and off-road in boulevard multi-use trail connections to support use by both residents and visitors of all ages. So yeah, more of the same. Infrastructure.
Right.
So, I mean, there is good news. We're most likely getting almost, what is it, a half a kilometer, a TJ Dolan path along the river there. So there's a little piece more. But again, that would be something that, I mean, it all ties in with the master transportation plan as well, and sort of looking at as the city as a whole and seeing where we can create those links. Okay, so education is next. They talk about increased bicycle and road safety training for citizens of all ages and abilities. So we do have Cycle Stratford. Wayne, you want to tell about that?
Yeah, actually, we've if you go to our website, you'll find that we now have a plan to do something called Ride with Confidence. It was going to be a 4-week program, like on 4 Saturdays, but because of COVID, we've reduced it to 2. And it'll be held on the last 2 Saturdays of June. And it'll take place at the parking lot of the St. Michael's Secondary School at 10 in the morning. And we've limited to 8 participants because of the COVID law. And so it's on the website now. We're gonna go on with it. We've got posters on Facebook. So spread the word.
So we have some cycling education, and that's definitely all ages and abilities.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with COVID, and nothing's happening at schools for this year and last year. So that's sort of not the greatest. But looking forward, hopefully we will have our bike rodeo back. I know that we had one, and now we haven't for the last few years. So that might be something as well to keep an eye on maybe for next season, is if we can help out in any way with a bike rodeo for kids as well.
And this program is there's no charge, so there's no, anybody can join. Money isn't a problem.
Yeah, those equity issues are score well for these things, so that's an important consideration as well.
Mhm. Yeah, they don't really say how much education we need in that regard, but it's certainly that program that you have is a start for sure. They talk about identifying engaging forms of education regarding share the road between motorists and cyclists. And then they have a few examples of that. So I think for that, it's probably, again, working with our communications person at the city, Mike Bites, to create an education program, perhaps. I don't know if anybody from this group wants to take that on, maybe developing some or looking at some of the information and kind of going through it and sending it to Mike. Anybody interested in that?
And I think though it would work really, I think what worked really well for the school thing was Mike at the city worked with like the clerks and then worked with the health unit and then also worked with the police to come up with a little campaign around the walking to school and parents, you know, parking. Like maybe the bigger is maybe they could create some kind of every spring as the bikes come out, something that ties in bike licensing with bike, you know, the rules, plus the health unit could provide some, I know the health unit has resources and then the police have as well. Like, I'm just wondering if it could be a little more coordinated so that then the health unit can share it on there and then the city can share it on, you know, that it can, right? As opposed to piecemeal.
What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, typically share the road messaging is great. One of the things I'm thinking about is I think, yeah, they'd totally be on board with share the road messaging thing, whether it would be like branded as Stratford or it would just be like a general share the road message so that it's relevant to all the areas of Huron-Perth. I'm not sure how they plan on juggling that on their social media feeds or if it matters, but in terms of like putting time towards it right at this moment, I'm not overly hopeful, but yeah, spring 2022, that's what next year is. Sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Okay, Tatiana?
So through the chair, if I could just add, so absolutely, we're always happy to kind of work on messaging and partner with other groups. It would be extremely helpful though, if this committee could provide some guidance on like what the messaging kind of looks like, what you want to focus on, kind of what Councillor Vasilak has just said, you know, tying it in with bike licensing, tying with when bike racks come out, if there's specific messaging you would like included. All of this information is really helpful when we work with the communications lead and try to develop, okay, what do these communications look like? What mode are we going to put them on? And if you have photos or suggestions for photos, like all of this information is really helpful when we're putting this all together.
So maybe this could be an action item that we can, so if we actually target spring 2022, launching into, and then we can tie it in with also Cycle Stratford's. I'm assuming they're going to redo this Ride with Confidence in June. If we could do it all together, maybe we should put this as an action item, let's say at the September meeting, where we can actually build whatever this looks like, and then we can refer it to staff for implementation. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds good.
We're already at May, right? June meeting, and then you know,
it's almost 2022 already.
I bought milk that expires in September. I'm really salty about that right now, is all I have to say. But yeah, so maybe if this was listed for September, then we can have like a little workshop, and maybe if it's in person, then we could pull out the whiteboard and build something that can be referred to stuff. Does that sound good, Tatiana?
That sounds fantastic. And then we could even bring the corporate communications lead potentially to the meeting. Again, having the expertise there, kind of drafting and providing some input always extremely helpful.
Sounds like a good plan.
Can I ask a question for clarification too? I've heard it mentioned bike licensing. What are you talking about when you're saying that?
The city does have a bike licensing program. So you're
Okay.
supposed to purchase a license when you have a bike, and then it's registered with the city. Also, if your bike gets stolen, then you have your serial number and so on. You might even get it back at some point, but I can't remember if it's $5 or $10.
Through the church, it's $6.
$6. Oh, okay, there you go.
Except when the city does the bike rodeo, they give them a bunch of stack of free ones, and the kids get their license for free if they show up to the rodeo, which is kind of fun.
Well, thank you.
Little known fact. So obviously we need to do some social media campaign. Guess what, everyone? You need to pay your $6.
Don't ask me if my bikes are licensed.
I don't think mine is either, but never mind about that. We'll fix that later. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, so actually there are some samples there. So when it comes to September, I'll bring this out and we'll get the samples that we can build on, I think, from other people's campaigns. Expand school travel planning to more elementary schools and consider ways of engaging schools at all levels through seasonal events and educational campaigns, newsletters with safety tips.
I'm just going to say we can't expand to more elementary schools because we did them all.
Yeah.
So I think they maybe thought Stratford was bigger than it is, because when we said that, maybe we didn't make it clear enough that all the schools participated in school travel planning.
Right.
That where we're falling short is so COVID put an end to any school travel planning. We just don't have the manpower to continue the program unless the schools individually choose to do so. That's what we had a coordinator, we don't. That's going to be our challenge, not so much the expanding to other schools.
Yeah, and some of the schools had parents who helped continue it. So hopefully that might happen as well. But yeah, maybe we can word it differently when we apply for bronze and say about how we were in all the schools at one point. Okay, so next, the E is encouragement. Invest in cycling and trails as a tourism and economic development strategy. Get involved with the Ontario by Bike Network to strengthen tourism and cycling within the community. Well, that just happened last week with the webinar. So it's Destination Stratford and the Perth County Tourism and Ontario Bike Network. They, I think, partnered and did that webinar last week, which really was an encouragement to businesses around to think about how they could attract tourism or cyclists to their establishment. So where they were talking about bed and breakfasts and places to eat, ways that you could accommodate bikes. And then you can also sign up as a business as part of their Ontario by Bike network, so that, you know, cyclists who are planning trips can Google and see what's available, and your B&B or whatever would pop up. So I think there was pretty good uptake. I went to the first of those two meetings, and there was quite a few people there. A friend of mine has a B&B, and she's signing up. So yeah, so we've done that.
So I went to the second one. I also went to the Ontario by Bike 4 years ago when I tried to get the STA to take us up on it, and dragged along one of the people from the STA, and there were no takers at the time. But I think COVID changed that. I think what would really help, we can't get, individual businesses, they will or they won't. But the one interesting thing is that BIAs can register as a BIA. So I think it would be really interesting if we just made a recommendation to the city center BIA at the city. If we sent on that maybe they would consider being an Ontario by Bike BIA. It's not that hard, really, when you look at the number of things, the things that they have to do to check off. So maybe I think that we can't control what individual businesses do, but we can make a recommendation to the BIA to maybe look at becoming.
The chair of the BIA was at my webinar. So Rob Russell, he was there. So he learned about the program as well. So, I mean, we can as a committee, if we want to send over a recommendation, or do we do that informally, or do we need to do something formal? What do you think?
Why not formally?
Right, so we can,
We make a recommendation that the BIA consider becoming Ontario by Bike certified. I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, Lee had his hand up first. Wayne. All in favor of the motion?
great.
Opposed?
We're just making our way through this list, right? We're gonna have it all done this meeting.
Hey, terrific.
Okay, next up is offer an open streets type event by closing off a major corridor to auto traffic and offering space to cyclists, pedestrians, and group exercise events. The Lakeside Drive temporary weekend closures that took place in 2020 may be conducive for this type of event. So we just talked about this today, whether we're actually going to be closing Lakeside Drive again. It will depend a bit on the festival and what they would like to do, but I don't know if this group wants to put forward a recommendation to ITS as to what we feel about the Lakeside closures last year, and or whether, I don't know if Cycle Stratford would be willing to host an event on one of the road closure days that would center around Lakeside Drive, if it did indeed happen. What do you think, Wayne?
Well, I would certainly recommend that we support doing that again this year. I don't know, Cycle Stratford used to have an opening event in May, but we haven't had that for the last 2 years. Whether we could come up with something for in the middle of the summer to do, I'm not sure. We're all pretty busy with PCCT and this educational program, so I won't promise anything right now. But we certainly support as a group the closing of Lakeside Drive like they did last summer.
So I was wondering, because one of the yoga studios in town did a sunrise like yoga they would do, which is really interesting. It would be really interesting to see if the road closures happened, whether there was a group of, let's say, yoga studios that or dance studios that did like a group, like if it says group exercise, maybe it would be like a sundown or a sunrise yoga on the close. I don't know. I think it would make for a really interesting picture. It would be nice and quiet so that if the festival is having a performance, or I'm just mostly kidding, but it would be interesting to see if we can mix it up a little, and if it's not always about cycling, right. Maybe it could be, only because that they suggested it. It might
or cycle to your yoga class event, free if you come on your bike or something like that. I don't know.
I'm trying to figure out how we bring more people into this, right? Because we're always relying on Cycle Stratford or some, the Avon Trail and Cycle Stratford, but maybe we could, now that, this idea of outdoor exercise is so big, maybe they're, I don't know, does anyone do yoga or know a yoga studio that might be interested in that and doing some outreach? I personally
don't. Another idea, when you were talking about that, it made me think of One Care and pole walking. They have some pole walking instructors that could probably lead some sort of activity like that, and we've got extra poles we could loan if you're looking for more ideas on that list.
Yeah, so like that whole, you can link it in with walking and fall prevention and pole walk. Like, I'm just thinking again, how do we get more? Maybe we can just think about that. Maybe we can think about it if the road closures happen. We may be getting ahead of ourselves.
Right.
But
we want to make a recommendation then about the road closures, or from this committee? Someone besides me?
I'll make that recommendation.
Okay. Anyone would like to second that?
Sure, I would second that.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Any other discussion?
I just wanted to add that last year we did a count on a number of Sundays when the road was closed. And there's certainly a lot more pedestrians using it than there are cyclists. You know, there were whole families with little kids, and some of them were on small bicycles, but there was a lot of walking on it, a lot more than biking. And I think that's great. Beside the river, lots of room, no worry about cars. It's great for walking.
Although the number of cyclists on that stretch, the city did do a count, and Taylor is on, but I think it was an 80% increase in cyclists as well.
Okay.
So even though you're right, there were a lot of walkers. There were also wheelchairs. There were,
Right.
you know, and then, well, we were one of them, but there was lots of active transportation happening along that stretch.
Yep.
I just wanted to add to what Kathy was talking about, the yoga last summer. I know in the evenings they had yoga classes as well. But perhaps through the Chamber of Commerce, we can get them to contact the various businesses that run different exercise venues and see if they're interested to lead certain activities down by Lakeside. And it could be, you know, interesting for them to generate interest in their business as well in the long run.
That's a good idea.
Well, let's vote on the motion, then we can discuss the next step as well. So all in favor of the motion of recommending closure? Opposed? So I guess maybe we could put an item on next month's agenda that if the road is closed, so we could create some recommendations of how we push more activity.
I guess they call it open streets events.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Okay, the next one is continue to plan and implement Bike Month. For inspiration, check out Share the Roads Bike Month recipe cards. So again, this is next year's planning because it's Bike Month like in a few days. So definitely for 2022, we'll put that into the mix. Evaluation and planning. Provide salary support for city staff to work on active transportation and making Stratford bicycles friendly. So we did talk about that earlier, having someone in engineering who is a specialist in this field and uses a part of their time to work on these active transportation projects. Develop and apply a complete streets policy design approach to all future road improvements. Explore opportunities to retrofit roads to implement designated bike facilities. So that's something kind of more infrastructure wise. Hopefully the message to engineering is that on all the projects, we just assume that there's going to be as much bike infrastructure as possible when we're planning or tendering the jobs, so that the infrastructure is assumed to be there unless there's a really good reason that it can't be. And is everyone familiar with complete streets? So it's sort of yeah, and I think that was recommended for Huron Street as well. So we're reconstructing Huron next year, again next spring. Well, we're gonna be very busy next spring. So, but that is a partially complete street model, I think. Is that right?
And I think this is where we do have a complete street policy for new construction. Although then you get pushback on the fact that people don't like the joke bike lanes, but that's a whole other conversation that we will park for now. So we do have it for new subdivisions. The interesting part is to have a complete streets policy on reconstruction. That's where it becomes, that's where the policy and the hierarchy of decision making, and Taylor can speak to that, about you have trees, you have, we're trying to maintain really old trees, we're trying to improve cycling, you're trying to actually go to AOTA sidewalks that aren't curb facing. There's a lot of different things that go into that decision making. So I think those policies are a little more detailed, right? But it would be interesting to see if there the potential to have a formal policy as opposed to what we do now, which is I think all these things are taken into consideration, but without a sort of, I'm not sure that if it's a formalized policy. I don't know if the council's done that.
So that's something for council to work on, but I guess this group could always recommend to council that that's something they would like to see in the future. Okay, and the next one is take advantage of provincial and federal infrastructure funding programs to support investments in new active transportation infrastructure. So that, yeah, that is in all the discussions of projects that we recommended. Hopefully they would be ready enough so that when funding comes that we can be first there at the door asking for money. Establish annual goals and report back to council on an annual basis on efforts to improve cycling each year and on goals and project funding requests. So annual goals, I guess as a committee, we could possibly do that or make recommendations of what, and that would seemingly stem from the master plan. To then take that on an annual basis and make short-term goals. Does that make sense? Yeah.
One of the report cards that we looked at was not just metrics, but they had a little section at the end of it. And I don't remember which of the samples that had what we'd like to see next year. And it had a couple of those pieces. So I'm wondering if integrating, like we have made recommendations in the past, we make recommendations about the McCarthy and the Duro and we have done that sort of on an ad hoc basis. But it would be interesting to incorporate a small section of whatever that report card design is on what we'd like to see next year.
Sounds good to me. Wayne, were you going to say something?
Exactly that is, could we incorporate it into the report card?
Okay, it's done. So that will be a blank space on when I send out everybody the report card mock-up. I'll have a blank space there, and then we can maybe next meeting fill in those blanks of some of the things that we want to see, maybe for the looking towards the end or for 2022.
And I would say that that's not just project specific, it can be budget specific. You can say we'd like to see you increase the active transportation, capital budget by X. It can be any number of things. It doesn't have to necessarily be, we want to see this piece of road done, right? So the recommendations can be beyond that.
Okay, and those were all of the things that we need to do to get to bronze. Imagine if we were going for gold. Wow. Yikes.
We are, just not yet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where does this report go to from here?
It went to us.
Yes, I know, but it's got to go
Yeah.
farther.
That's a good question.
Like, does city staff get it? Does the city council get it? Who gets it?
It would be good to provide it to council for information, for sure.
It would be really interesting if we wanted to list this on a future infrastructure, transportation, and transportation safety subcommittee meeting as a for information and discussion, right? I think that would be an appropriate place to, and if somebody from ATAC wanted to come and speak to it, that we have done things like that in the past. And what's nice is those meetings are now recorded and put on Facebook Live. It would get some public, exposure to it, but then you would also be able to present it to council. So maybe that's just something we can list. And if anybody from, it doesn't matter who it is, but if somebody from this committee wanted to come and present it or speak to it to council, I think that might be a good way to spread the word.
Did we want to commit to doing like next meeting or the meeting after that? I don't know. What do you think? As the chair of the ITS committee.
I don't, part of this would be staff. Thing is, the June, if there's a lot on, like I don't think we want to say we want it on the June meeting, because what happens if the June meeting has a really big thing on it, or there's lots of items that have to be covered off, or if there's something controversial, then it gets shuffled. I think what we could do is ask is to find a good spot to put it on a meeting. Would be my preference.
Okay, well, we'll leave it in somebody's hands then to remember.
I can, you know what, I'll talk to Jody Atkins, who I'll talk to all the people involved and see what the upcoming agendas look like, and where we might be able to fit one in that you know, people won't doze out if we have a particularly long one.
Okay, sounds good. That was a great question. Thank you.
Who would like to come and present it?
I would make myself available as necessary.
Maybe we can have a couple people in case it ends up being on one where you're not available, but you know what, we can.
Once we have a date, we can pick some people.
Okay, so I think that leads us to the next agenda item. So I'll pass it up to David. Hopefully the dogs will calm down for a minute.
Well, we back up to the Avon Trail. So obviously some dogs are walking by on the Avon Trail. So with that in mind, the next agenda item is a motion to adjourn. Unless there is any other business. Anybody else? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, John and Lee. All in favor? I'm agreed. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Hope to see you
Thank
next
you.
month. Thank you very much, everyone.